Accidental decapitation of Charlie. Spider-Man vs. Wolverine #1. Comics. In Spider-Man vs. Wolverine #1, 1987, Peter Parker travels to Berlin to investigate a story involving his friend Ned Leeds. There, he gets tangled in a Cold War espionage conflict alongside Wolverine. The primary target in the center of this spy game is Charlie, a former KGB operative and a close friend of Wolverine. Charlie has spent years working as an assassin, but after betraying her agency and becoming hunted by both the KGB and freelance hitmen, she reaches her breaking point. Overwhelmed by paranoia, guilt, and the constant stress of being hunted, Charlie decides she no longer wants to live on the run, but she lacks the will to end her own life. Instead, she plans to force someone else to do it for her. While Peter and Logan track Charlie through a dark Berlin cemetery at night, Logan recognizes Charlie's suicidal state of mind and attempts to grant her final request by killing her himself as an act of mercy. Peter, holding fast to his strict moral stance against taking any life, intervenes to stop Logan. The two heroes engage in a brutal, chaotic brawl across the gravestones, with Peter using his superior speed and agility to keep Wolverine at bay. As the fight escalates, Charlie watches from the shadows, realizing that Logan is occupied. She creeps up directly behind Spider-Man while his senses are overwhelmed by the combat with Wolverine. Charlie taps Peter on the shoulder. Driven by pure survival instinct and adrenaline, expecting Wolverine to attack from behind, Peter spins around instantly and throws a full-force, panicked punch behind him. Because Peter was operating under the assumption that he was striking an adamantium-laced mutant who could take a heavy blow, he did not hold back his superhuman strength. His fist hits Charlie squarely in the neck and face with brutal momentum. The force of the blow instantly breaks Charlie's neck, killing her on the spot. Spider-Man stands frozen over her body, staring at his bloodied hand in shock as he realizes he was tricked into committing manslaughter. The incident remains one of the few instances in comic history where Peter Parker's superhuman strength directly caused an accidental death. Pushing the Green Goblin into his glider, Spider-Man No Way Home movies. In Spider-Man No Way Home, 2021, the climax on the Statue of Liberty shifts from a mission of curing villains to a blind, vengeful execution attempt. Following the death of Aunt May at Happy Hogan's condo, Peter Parker, Tom Holland, is consumed by grief and rage. When Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, arrives at the final battle, Peter abandons all tactical coordination with the other alternate Spider-Men and attacks Osborn with brutal, unfiltered aggression. The fight is completely one-sided. Fueled by adrenaline and raw vengeance, Peter ruthlessly pummels Osborn across the scaffolding of the Statue of Liberty. He shatters Osborn's armor, tears away his equipment, and ignores the Goblin's sadistic laughing and mocking taunts. Peter repeatedly drives his fists into Osborn's face, beating him into a bloody, defenseless heap on the ground. Osborn is completely broken, unable to defend himself, but Peter does not stop. Spotting the Green Goblin's glider nearby, the very weapon that killed Aunt May, Peter webs it toward himself and catches it. Standing over the battered and prone Norman Osborn, Peter raises the razor-sharp heavy glider high above his head with both hands. He intends to impale Osborn straight through the chest with the glider's front blades, seeking to end the Goblin's life permanently. Just as Peter brings the glider down with full superhuman force to execute Osborn, Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker steps directly into the path of the strike. Maguire's Spider-Man catches the underside of the heavy glider, using all his physical strength to hold it back inches away from Osborn's body. The two Spider-Men lock eyes in a tense, motionless struggle, with Holland's Peter exerting every muscle to push the deadly blades down, while Maguire's Peter refuses to let him cross that line. While Holland's Peter is held in place, the Goblin pulls out a hidden glider blade and stabs Maguire's Peter in the back. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man throws Holland the glider cure, which Holland then forcefully injects into Osborn's neck, wiping away the Goblin persona and ending the battle. Disintegrating Morlun, the Amazing Spider-Man #526 comics. In The Amazing Spider-Man #526, 2006, part of the other storyline, Peter Parker faces Morlun, an ancient vampiric entity who feeds on spider totems. Throughout their confrontation, Morlun systematically overpowers Spider-Man, delivering a beating so severe that he gouges out and consumes one of Peter's eyes. Peter is left near death, rendered comatose, and rushed to an emergency room inside a hospital intensive care unit. Morlun tracks Peter down to his hospital room to consume the remaining life force from his dying body. Mary Jane Watson steps in front of the bed to protect her husband, but Morlun casually grabs her, breaks her arm, and tosses her aside. Seeing Mary Jane harmed triggers a primal, subterranean transformation within Peter's dying psyche. The ancient, animalistic spider god aspect within Peter takes full control of his broken body, instantly reviving him in a monstrous, non-human state. Peter leaps from the hospital bed with supernatural ferocity. Retaining zero human hesitation, he pins Morlun to the floor using immense superhuman physical pressure. Venomous, razor-sharp stingers erupt from Peter's wrists, a brand new biological mutation forced out by the primal spider entity. Before Morlun can react or exert his superior strength, Peter drives these stingers directly into Morlun's chest and shoulders. Peter unleashes a lethal dosage of acidic biological venom straight into Morlun's bloodstream. The sheer toxicity and raw mystical energy of the venom instantly begins breaking down Morlun's physical molecular structure from the inside out. Morlun screams as his cellular makeup destabilizes, his skin and muscle tissues rapidly rotting away in seconds. The sheer force of the biological attack completely dissolves Morlun's body into a pile of decaying ash and dust on the hospital floor, leaving Peter standing over his remains before collapsing. Ripping off the finisher's face, The Amazing Spider-Man #113 comics. In The Amazing Spider-Man Annual #5, 1988, often miscited as issue #113, Peter Parker travels to Algeria to uncover the truth behind his biological parents, Richard and Mary Parker, who were branded as traitors to the United States. His investigation leads him directly into the criminal empire of the Red Skull, who dispatches his top elite assassin, a towering, heavily armed hitman known as the Finisher. Equipped with specialized artillery and deadly guided missiles, the Finisher's sole objective is to eliminate Peter before he uncovers the intelligence documents that clear his parents' names. The confrontation escalates into a high-speed vehicular chase across the desert terrain. The Finisher pursues Spider-Man in a modified armored military war car, firing heavy weaponry to kill him on sight. Realizing the danger, Spider-Man leaps onto the hood of the speeding armored vehicle. The Finisher activates a specialized missile launcher, mounted on the back of the car, and fires a heat-seeking missile at point-blank range, targeting Spider-Man directly. Instead of dodging sideways, Spider-Man relies on his lightning-fast reflexes and superhuman agility. He webs the front of the missile mid-flight, redirects its trajectory, and uses his strength to slam the armed explosive back down into the open driver cabin of the armored vehicle. The missile detonates instantly inside the tight enclosure. The resulting high-yield explosion completely destroys the war car, tearing apart its armored plating and flipping the vehicle into a burning wreckage. The violent force of the blast impacts the Finisher directly inside the cockpit, causing catastrophic blast trauma, severe shrapnel wounds, and fatal burns across his upper torso and face. Spider-Man pulls the hitman out from the burning metal, but the damage is already done. The Finisher succumbs to his fatal injuries seconds later on the sand, revealing with his dying breath that Richard and Mary Parker were actually double agents working for the U.S. government. Sacrificing Uncle Aaron's killer/burglar, The Amazing Spider-Man #200 comics. In The Amazing Spider-Man #200, 1979, Peter Parker comes face-to-face with the original burglar, the man who shot and killed his Uncle Ben years prior. The burglar returns to Queens, breaking into the Parker home and holding Aunt May hostage in a search for a hidden treasure he believes was buried on the property decades ago, by a Prohibition-era gangster. Learning that the man responsible for destroying his family has returned and threatened Aunt May, Peter is consumed by immense rage. He dons his Spider-Man suit, tracks the burglar to an abandoned warehouse at the waterfront, the exact same location where their original confrontation took place years before. Spider-Man corners the killer, web-slinging through the shadows and tearing through walls to strike absolute terror into him. Instead of holding back, Peter uses his full physical presence to intimidate the elderly criminal. The burglar, completely terrified by the shadowy monster stalking him through the dark, frantically fires his revolver at Spider-Man, but every bullet bounces off or misses as Peter relentlessly closes the distance. Peter corners the burglar against a brick wall, stepping into the dim light and ripping off his Spider-Man mask. He reveals his face, forcing the killer to look directly at the nephew of Ben Parker, the man he murdered. The shock, dread, and sheer terror of realizing he is completely trapped by a superpowered vigilante seeking vengeance causes the burglar's heart to give out. The burglar clutches his chest in blinding pain, suffers a massive coronary heart attack from sheer terror, and collapses onto the concrete floor. Peter stands over the dying man, watching as he gasps for air and passes away on the floor of the warehouse, officially ending the life of the man who started Peter's entire journey. Activating instant kill mode in the Battle of Earth, Avengers Endgame movies. In Avengers Endgame, 2019, during the climactic Battle of Earth, Peter Parker, Tom Holland, is tasked with protecting the Stark Nano-Gauntlet containing all 6 Infinity Stones. As thousands of Thanos' alien army, specifically the 4-armed feral beasts known as Outriders, pour onto the ruined Avengers compound battlefield, Peter finds himself completely overwhelmed. Clinging to the gauntlet while sprinting and web-slinging through the chaotic war zone, he is eventually knocked to the ground and swarmed by a massive wave of Outriders attempting to tear him apart and retrieve the stones. Realizing he cannot clear the growing horde using his standard non-lethal combat techniques or web shooters, Peter activates a mechanical feature built into his Iron Spider armor, Instant Kill Mode. Upon activation, the suit's automated combat system takes over, overriding his standard settings. The suit's eyes turn from bright white to glowing red. 4 metallic mechanical spider legs deploy from the back of the Iron Spider suit. These spider legs operate with autonomous precision, speed, and lethal force, turning Peter into a whirlwind of absolute destruction. The mechanical legs extend outwards and begin impaling, slashing, and stabbing through the incoming Outrider horde at terrifying speeds. As the alien beasts jump at him from all directions, Peter spins continuously across the ground. The battle sequence results in dozens of Outrider alien troops being instantly slaughtered, clearing a pile of dead alien bodies around him until Captain Marvel arrives on the battlefield to take the gauntlet. What if Spider-Man, Back in Black? #1, 2009. The timeline diverges after the events of Civil War. Instead of Aunt May being struck by the sniper's bullet meant for Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson is shot and killed. Overwhelmed by grief and consumed by rage, Peter puts on his black cloth Spider-Man suit and abandons the restraint that normally defines him. He begins hunting down the people responsible for MJ's death, eventually following the trail to Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Peter confronts Fisk with none of his usual humor or hesitation. He overwhelms the Kingpin and makes it clear that he is no longer willing to let his enemies escape, simply because he has always followed a strict no-killing rule. The confrontation reaches its breaking point when Peter kills Kingpin, crossing the moral line he had spent his entire career refusing to cross. For Peter Parker, this isn't just another victory over a villain. It represents the moment his grief and anger finally break the principle that has defined Spider-Man for years. This is one of the clearest alternate universe examples of Spider-Man breaking his no-kill rule. Executing Kraven the Hunter, The Amazing Spider-Man #33, 2023, Peter Parker becomes the target of a dark, mystical experiment involving Kraven the Hunter and Norman Osborn's sins. Kraven and Queen Goblin possess a mystical spear containing the concentrated sins that had been removed from Norman Osborn. Their plan is not simply to kill Spider-Man, it is to use the weapon to corrupt him. When Peter intervenes, he is struck by the spear and becomes infected with Norman's accumulated sins. The corruption begins affecting Peter's mind, bringing out a darker and more violent side of his personality. Peter's entire attitude changes. Instead of treating Kraven like another villain to be stopped, he begins hunting Kraven as prey. Peter tracks Kraven through the wilderness and turns the hunter's own methods against him. The confrontation becomes a twisted reflection of Kraven's last hunt, with Peter deliberately trying to make Kraven experience the same fear and helplessness that Kraven once inflicted on Spider-Man. Peter eventually captures Kraven and buries him alive, trapping him underground in a coffin. It is a horrifying moment because Peter is no longer simply defeating his enemy. He is deliberately subjecting Kraven to psychological torture and leaving him to die. However, Peter does not shoot Kraven with a shotgun, and Kraven does not die in the coffin. The significance of the moment is that Norman Osborn's sins have pushed Peter into behavior that is completely opposite to the moral code Spider-Man normally follows.